Ferrari's new suspension for 2026 isn't just another technical update that teams quietly roll out and hope works. This is Ferrari openly admitting that what went wrong last season wasn't about chasing too much downforce or getting lost in aero concepts, but about misunderstanding the mechanical foundation of the car itself. After a year defined by inconsistency, narrow operating windows, and constant compromise, Ferrari finally stopped asking how to extract more performance and started asking why the car kept falling apart the moment conditions changed. That shift in mindset is what makes this suspension reveal so important, because it signals a philosophical reset rather than a patch. If you think back to 2025, Ferrari often looked fast on paper and in controlled conditions. But the moment ride height changed, tires degraded or balance shifted, performance simply vanished. The SF25 demanded perfection to work, and that's a dangerous place to be in modern Formula One. Cars that only perform in ideal conditions don't win championships, especially when races are decided by adaptability, tire management, and confidence over long stints. Ferrari's leadership finally accepted that reality, and under Leclerc, the team has rebuilt the suspension concept from the ground up using failure as a reference instead of something to hide from. This is where Project 678 really begins. Rather than doubling down on complexity, Ferrari looked at what made the SF25 music so fragile and traced the problem back to mechanical behavior. The car didn't forgive errors. It punished drivers for pushing, punished engineers for aggressive setups, and punished the team every time conditions deviated from the narrow window they were targeting. And if you're honest, you could hear that frustration in the driver feedback all season long. The car wasn't music something you could lean on. It was something you had to tiptoe around. Let me ask you this. Do you think Ferrari spent too long blaming aerodynamics when the real issue was mechanical all along? Drop a quick yes or no in the comments, because this suspension rethink suggests Ferrari believe they absolutely did. And if you want to stay on top of how these 2026 concepts are evolving, make sure you're subscribed and notifications are on. We're pushing toward 2,000 subscribers, and your support genuinely helps keep this kind of deep breakdown coming. What makes this reveal so compelling is that Ferrari aren't trying to design a perfect car anymore. They're trying to design a car that works in the real world with real tires, real bumps, and real pressure. And once you understand why the old suspension philosophy failed so badly, the decision Ferrari made for 2026 starts to make a lot more sense, because it represents a clean break from everything that held them back last season. To understand why Ferrari made such a radical decision for 2026, you have to look honestly at how the SF25 failed when it mattered most. On the surface, the double pull rod suspension looked clever and sophisticated. It promised aerodynamic advantages and theoretical performance gains, but in reality, it exposed Ferrari's biggest weakness. The car demanded extreme precision just to stay in its operating window. And the moment anything shifted, whether that was track temperature, fuel load, or tire wear, grip simply disappeared. Ride height sensitivity became a nightmare. Plank were forced conservative setups. And instead of attacking races, Ferrari were constantly managing risk before the lights even went out. The biggest issue wasn't outright speed, it was trust. The suspension didn't forgive mistakes, and in modern Formula One, unforgiving cars rarely win titles. Drivers were left chasing balance rather than exploiting performance, adjusting corner by corner instead of committing fully. Every lap became a negotiation with the car, and that hesitation costs lap time, destroys tire life, and drains confidence over a stint. Ferrari eventually realized that no amount of aerodynamic refinement could fix a platform that was fundamentally unstable once pushed outside perfect conditions. That's why the decision to move to push rod suspension at both the front and the rear for 2026 is so significant. This isn't Ferrari going backwards or copying the past. It's a move driven by packaging freedom, mechanical clarity, and stability across a wider range of ride heights. For the first time since 2010, Ferrari will run a pushrod rear layout. And that alone tells you how serious this rethink really is. Pushrod geometry allows internal components to be positioned more efficiently, reduces structural constraints, and gives engineers more freedom to control how the car behaves mechanically without constantly fighting aero sensitivity. What really matters here is that Ferrari aren't using pushrod suspension just because it's simpler. They're using it because it gives them control. Control over how the car loads the tires. Control over how it reacts to bumps and braking forces, and control over how predictable the platform feels to the driver. That predictability is everything, because without it, even the fastest car on paper becomes slow over a race distance. Ferrari learned that lesson the hard way in 2025, and this suspension choice is their response. I'm curious what you think here, so let me know in the comments. Do you believe pushrod suspension is the right call for 2026? Or do you think Ferrari gave up on pull rod too soon? And if this breakdown is helping you understand why these decisions matter, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. We're working toward 200 subscribers, and your support makes a real difference. This shift in suspension layout sets the stage for something even more ambitious, because Ferrari didn't stop at geometry changes. The real innovation comes from how they're using the suspension to control tire behavior itself. And that's where things start to get truly interesting. Where Ferrari's 2026 suspension really separates itself from conventional thinking is in how aggressively it targets tire behavior, especially at the front of the car. Under Leclerc's direction, the suspension is no longer just a structure that supports aerodynamic load. It's an active tool designed to manage how the tire deforms, how it regains grip, and how it behaves during the most critical phases of the lap. This is a fundamental shift from how Ferrari approached suspension in 2025, and it goes straight to the heart of their biggest weakness. One of the most ambitious elements of this concept is Ferrari's pursuit of music-controlled mechanical flexibility within the front suspension, particularly in the first link of the upper wishbone. This isn't about making parts soft or letting them bend unpredictably. It's engineered compliance designed to respond differently depending on load direction and speed. The objective is precise camber recovery exactly when the tire needs it most, especially on corner entry, without sacrificing stability through the middle of the corner. That balance is incredibly difficult to achieve, and it's something Ferrari struggled with all last season. Both drivers described the same issue from different angles. The front end simply couldn't be trusted. In medium speed corners, the car oscillated between understeer and sudden bite, forcing hesitation. Drivers never knew which version of the front axle they were going to get when they turned in, and that split second of doubt is devastating in Formula One. It doesn't just hurt lap time, it ruins tire life and destroys confidence across an entire stint. Ferrari's new suspension philosophy is designed to eliminate that uncertainty by creating a front axle that loads progressively, communicates clearly through the steering, and behaves predictably across a much wider operating window. What makes this even more impressive is that Ferrari are attempting to achieve this while remaining fully compliant with FIA regulations. Every component must pass static inspections and load tests, yet still behave differently under real-world forces at speed. That means designing parts that appear rigid when measured in prescribed directions, but respond intelligently to complex loads on track. Ferrari believe they've identified a narrow window where this is possible, and early indications suggest the concept has already passed initial legality checks without raising concerns. I want to know what you think about this approach. So drop a comment below. Do you believe driver confidence on corner entry is more important than peak aerodynamic load? And if you're enjoying these deeper technical explanations, don't forget to subscribe and help us push closer to 2,000 subscribers. Your support keeps this kind of content coming. What's fascinating is that this suspension philosophy doesn't exist in isolation. It's been developed alongside Ferrari's aerodynamic concept for 2026. And once you understand how those two areas interact under the new regulations, the scale of this rethink becomes even clearer. Under the 2026 regulations, suspension behavior becomes more important than ever, and Ferrari clearly understand that. Active aerodynamics will constantly shift the car between low drag and high downforce music modes, meaning vertical and longitudinal loads will change far more abruptly than in the current era. If the suspension can't stabilize the platform during those transitions, aerodynamic performance becomes inconsistent and extremely difficult for the driver to exploit. Ferrari's solution is to let the suspension absorb and smooth those changes mechanically, preventing sudden load spikes from destabilizing the chassis in braking zones and mid-corner. This is why Ferrari are treating the front of the car as a complete system rather than a collection of separate components. Reports suggest they've already analyzed more than 50 front-wing concepts, not to chase a single peak downforce figure, but to understand how airflow behaves as the suspension moves and the tire deforms. That's a direct lesson from 2025, when Ferrari often produced strong wind tunnel numbers, only to see those gains disappear once the car ran at realistic ride heights on track. For 2026, no aerodynamic concept is being evaluated without understanding how it interacts with suspension kinematics and tire behavior. At the rear, the move to push rod suspension unlocks major packaging benefits. Tighter layout around the gearbox and diffuser improves airflow quality and reduces sensitivity to plank wear, one of Ferrari's most damaging issues last season. Being forced into conservative ride heights and lift and coast strategies cost performance before races even started. A more stable rear platform allows Ferrari to operate closer to the optimum without constantly living on the edge of legality, restoring freedom and setup choices that simply didn't exist in 2025. There's also a critical efficiency angle here. Improved mechanical grip means Ferrari can rely less on aggressive aerodynamic solutions that increase drag that fits perfectly with the new power unit rules where energy recovery, electrical deployment, and efficiency across the lap matter more than raw peak downforce. Mechanical grip becomes a performance multiplier, enabling better energy management instead of forcing the car to compensate aerodynamically. Quick question for you before we move on. Do you think mechanical grip will matter more than aerodynamics under the 2026 rules? A simple yes or no in the comments is perfect. And if you're enjoying this breakdown, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. We're getting closer to 2,000 subscribers, and every bit of support really helps. All of this leads to the most human part of the story. Because the real test of this suspension philosophy won't be in simulations or regulations, but in how it unlocks the drivers who have to push the car at the limit every single lap. See, for Lewis Hamilton, this suspension philosophy could be genuinely transformative. His driving style relies heavily on confidence under braking and precision on corner entry, and that's exactly where the SF25 repeatedly let him down. The lack of trust in the front axle forced him into defensive driving, constant correction and compromise, none of which suit a driver whose greatest strength is commitment at the limit. A front end that loads predictably, communicates clearly, and responds the same way lap after lap could allow Hamilton to reconnect with the instincts that defined his career, especially in a regulation era where driver input and adaptability will matter more than ever. Charles Leclerc stands to benefit in a different but equally important way. His advantage has often come from consistency over a stint rather than knife-edge aggression. The new suspension is designed to protect the tires, maintain balance over long runs, and reward repeatable performance rather than isolated peaks of pace. Over a full season, that kind of consistency often proves more valuable than spectacular single laps, particularly in races decided by strategy and degradation. Ferrari are clearly aiming to give both drivers a platform that works with their strengths instead of forcing them into constant adaptation. What's just as significant is how Ferrari have changed their internal process around suspension development. Instead of driver feedback being filtered through separate departments, both Hamilton and Leclerc now feed directly into cross-functional groups that combine vehicle dynamics, aerodynamics, and tire specialists. That reduces interpretation loss and accelerates meaningful change, ensuring that feedback leads to real design adjustments rather than abstract discussions. Combined music with Ferrari's modular approach, where multiple suspension variants are already in development, this represents a cultural shift. Ferrari are no longer betting an entire season on a single idea and hoping it works. There's no illusion inside the team that this path is safe. Controlled flexibility invites scrutiny, aggressive geometry increases complexity, every new concept introduces risk, but Ferrari have accepted that caution delivered nothing last season. Playing it safe produced a car that looked refined on paper and collapsed under real-world conditions. This new suspension is a statement that Ferrari are done, designing cars that demand perfection to function. Before we wrap up, I want to hear your take. Who do you think benefits more from this suspension philosophy, Hamilton or Leclerc? Drop your answer in the comments, and if you want to support the channel, make sure you're subscribed, like the video, and help us reach that 2,000 subscriber goal. What Ferrari have revealed isn't insane because it breaks the rules. It's insane because it breaks with everything that failed them. If this suspension performs as intended, its impact won't be one flashy lap, but consistency, confidence, and adaptability across an entire season. Those are the foundations championships are built